So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning to those who are here and so numerous on-site. And I also want to extend my welcome to those who are actually online. All of you are very warm welcome to our session, which is about smart grids, electricity smart grids, supporting renewable energy source integration and the clean energy transition. And it is my great pleasure to start this session, which is actually led by the distribution system operator of the electricity grid in Czechia, EGD, and also co-organized with an Association of European Distribution System Operators, EUSEW, and European Climate, Infrastructure and Environmental Executive Agency, CINEA. My name is Ona Kostanaitė-Grinkevičienė, and I will be a moderator of this session today. However, in a daily life, I am a head of sector in charge of projects co-funded by Connecting Europe Facility Energy at CINEA. So, let me shortly present what's ahead of us today. So, the session, as I said already, will focus on how electricity smart grids can support renewable integration and clean energy transition. And we have two parts. The first one, we have a couple distinguished guests where we will focus on key insights about smart electricity grids and their role for renewable integration and energy transition. And also we will have two real case examples presented from the projects of common interest, so known PCIs. And second part will be a panel discussion. We will have a discussion on how the so-called smartification of the electricity grids can help solving the challenges faced by decarbonized energy system. And audience, on-site and online, you are not spared from active participation. So first of all, we will have a couple of tasks for you. So I would kindly ask you to have your devices ready because we will have some Slido questions to you. And then we will rely on your engagement, active engagement, I would want to emphasize, for questions and answer session. And you see on the screen Slido. So I would kindly ask you to scan it, because as of now, actually, you can start asking your questions if you have some desperate ones already, or throughout the entire session. So, let's start. And the first speaker of today, and I'm really honored to present, it's a long-time standing member of the European Parliament and current Minister of Energy in Luxembourg, Mr. Claude Turmes. So, the floor is yours.
Good morning, I would say good morning Brussels, good morning Europe. So my first message, there's a lot of people who speak about zero carbon in 2050. That is the wrong message, especially in the power sector. The power sector in Europe needs to be zero carbon in 2035. There is no scenario where we can be 1.5 compatible in Europe if we are not already zero carbon in the power sector in Europe. And that will be a power sector which will be probably a 90% plus renewable power sector. And of course, you will understand that is go big and fast. I'm now the Minister of Energy in Luxembourg. And I can tell you it's easier to have to negotiate targets, tough targets at EU level. And I think I was quite successful to do that as a member of parliament. But it's really a tough job to get then this energy transition to the ground. And I think I got to the conclusion that the center of this energy transition is the electricity grid. And the jewels of this energy transition are the grid companies. the TSOs and the DSOs. They still have a problem, which is they have above them, they have regulators. I was very instrumental in the 2003 electricity, at that time, market design directive as a rapporteur. And it was only good that we established regulators. Regulators, together with unbundling, was the basis, the economic model to allow competition, and especially competition for solar and wind, because the oligopolies who had coal and nuclear would never have allowed solar and wind to the grid, and using the grid to make solar and wind tiny and not the big competitors which they are today. But regulators risk to be catched in the first phase of regulation, which is efficiency, melting down the rents. And now we need, and I think that's something also my plea to European Commission. I did it already 2 months ago on a speech here in Brussels. The regulators need to understand that it's, of course, always about efficiency, especially also allowing IT into the grid system, because that's maybe sometimes more efficient and less costly than copper, and it will above all be faster. But I think the regulators need to understand, without massive investment into grid, we will not be able to get renewables. So we need the regulators to be in the second phase. And to allow what is the theme of the today's conference, which is smart grid. And for me, the grid, I think, has 4 or 5 components of being smart. The first is every part of the grid must be digitalized. In Luxembourg, we have a 99% rollout of smart meters, so we are able to manage the flows of the low voltage. I have urged our national company, which is largely controlled by the government, to have every medium voltage device fully digitalized, so that they can also monitor and manage the medium voltage. So that is very, very important. In Luxembourg now, when you build a new apartment house, you have to invest into a 10,000 euro electric, device, which allows the 20 or 30 or 50 electric cars which will be in the cellar to be intelligent. So we design new investments into charging, new investments into heat pumps have to be, from the beginning on, designed in a way to be dispatchable. Because if they are not, they cannot help us in the flexibility. So I think that's also very important to get to that. So full digitalization and using everything digital can bring to shorten the time that the grid can take massive PV and wind uptake, because copper is too slow. So that's my first message. Second message is demand-side management. Putin has, I think, will make sure that every industrialist will now really think about demand-side management. The market design directive is also pushing into that. So, and we need to really allow what the Americans have already allowed in US. The American demand-side market is 10, 15 times the European demand-side market. And it is stupid, it would be extremely stupid for the consumers and for the system if we would not now, in the next 2-3 years, also taking profit of the crisis triggered by Putin to accelerate the uptake of the demand-side management. The third issue, and I know that for grid companies who come from a monopolistic top-down culture, this is anti-cultural evolution, anti-their culture evolution, that's self-consumption. Self-consumption is something which we need to get the buy-in in citizens. In Luxembourg, we have a massive, we are multiplying solar investments by 15 in these days, and 2/3 of this uptake is self-consumption. 2/3. And that's good for the grid because it reduces the stress on the grid. But I really have almost to push, to kick, to I don't know what else, if not very gentle, my national distribution and companies to accept that the market will go for self-consumption. And I want you to understand you have to embrace self-consumption. It is in your own interest because it lowers. And of course, we will have to do tariff adaptations, but that is not so difficult to get. And we do self-consumption not only for the small consumers. We have now tenders, 50 megawatt PV, where you can also have battery storage in the call, so that you get also battery, PV plus battery in small and medium enterprises. And we have ArcelorMittal, Goodyear, the big industry in Luxembourg is now also covering all their roofs with PV and often also doing this combined with batteries. So digital, demand side, self-consumption, and then of course it's about storage. And I just come from a, let's say, a floor above where we discussed storage. Storage is a complicated story because what is the cheapest storage? Is your grid? Who will build a pump storage? Who will build a molten salt? Who will build a big mega battery against the fact that the electrons can go from Faro to Vilnius? That's the cheapest way of storing electricity for the next 4 or 5 years. But as we have to be zero carbon in 35, as that is 90% plus renewables, we need storage. And the invisible hand will not make this pop up. And your industry has, in my eyes, a Freudian psychological problem with storage, which was our fault. Our fault as the legislators who in 2018, when we negotiated the market design directive, we excluded storage, we excluded grid operators to invest into storage, and I was the only guy at the table at that time to say, I think we are going too far here. There was nobody in the room who helped me to win that a better equilibrium back in 2018. And what has happened is because storage is not a business model for you, you have forgotten about storage. And look, I'm a bit provocative. If after 1.5 hours today, you have convinced me that it is not the case, but I have the impression that the fact that the European legislation has ruled out investment of grid operators into storage has created a vacuum. And we should discuss how we can break this vacuum, because we need now the upbuild of storage because the power system, the fossils will go out very quickly of the system, which means the rotating units will get out. So I have 2-3 ideas on this. One would be obligation for car manufacturers in Europe to have a vehicle-to-grid ready batteries from, let's say, 2026 on. Second would be ruling out that any data center has a diesel as a black starter, but can only have batteries as a black starter. And the third is linking the uptake of electric trucks and the charging station for electric trucks, which will be one of your next nightmares, with batteries. And why can I dare to say that charging of electric trucks will be a nightmare for you? Because I'm coming from the country where we have the 2 biggest filling stations in volume of the world. And all of you know Air de Berchem and Air de Capellen, because that was the place where you had cheap diesel. Imagine Air de Berchem will have the same number of lorries to load in the electric works than in the diesel world. That means 100 charging stations, and the standard will be 2 megawatt. 200 megawatt in a country which has a peak of 900. I think this is we will have to do it, and it is impossible to do charging station, fast charging station, ultra fast charging station for lorries if you don't combine it with batteries. And these batteries, and that is what is my main question to you, or one of my main questions, how can you tender batteries? Because you would need services, ancillary services, zero carbon services. So I think we should now create market where the fossils are no more allowed to be in the ancillary services. That will create a critical mass of low carbon, or of low carbon, of renewable-based electricity plus battery plus or malt salt or whatever. So zero carbon ancillary services. That is what you have to tender. And then we have to, because the batteries and every storage will have a second function, that is arbitrage. Arbitrage in a market which will be largely renewable, variable renewable dominated, which means for sure on Sunday afternoon the price is negative. A sunny, windy Sunday afternoon will always have negative prices in Europe. And is that a good, so why don't we have a business model where we have arbitrage, that in these moments the batteries are filled up, other storage is filled up, massive gigawatts, so that on Monday morning we can start the week with running it on larger renewable shares. So, and for me that is so, I think the moment has come to do zero carbon or 100% renewable electricity-based ancillary services. And we have to grow this market. And we need to discuss this with you. And may we start today. And maybe a last thing is, Commission is now working on a 2040 climate. Where do we, after we have successfully now done the 2030, I think there is 2 or 3 things which we have to have in mind. I would have 3. One is the whole European power sector has to be zero carbon in 2035. That is what Fatih Birol from IEA has called for the last 3 years. And I think we should just do it. And then the second thing is looking at the ramping up of the renewables of the next 4 or 5 years and just continue them. Because once we have a big production line for offshore wind, if we have a 14 gigawatt production line for offshore wind to fulfill our 2030 targets, it would be stupid to let it break down to 5 or 6 in 31. So I think that is important for the modeling which has to happen at Commission. And the third thing in this plan, which is important, plan for storage. What is the short-term, medium-term, and long-term storage needs in a power system which, at latest in 2035, will be 90% plus renewables? Because that storage will not pop up with the invisible hand, because we have the most sophisticated grid in Europe, a fantastic market, so the cheapest electricity. Nobody will invest in storage in the next years, because it's just too cheap. So our power system is too good to make high capex investments in storage possible. Was that 10 minutes? Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Claude, for these insights. I hope the audience got provoked, at least me. I am now considering moving to Luxembourg, to these houses that you mentioned. And let's see actually what European Commission has to reply to some also provocations. So while we are still waiting for some questions on Slido, I want to give the floor to Tom Hulse, who actually is replacing in qualitative way Katerina Siko, who unfortunately can't join us, not by her choice. But actually, I'm very glad to have Tom here. So then, Tom, please, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much. Thanks for the chance to be here today. And thanks for the chance to be able to agree with Claude yet again. All sounds good to me. All sounds good. From the Commission's perspective, though, well, I mean, Claude, you flagged up the pace of change that we're facing. On the one hand, the direction of travel was clear with all the strategies and the framework, whether that's Fit for 55, the targets, the multiple strategies we put out on grid integration, on hydrogen, on storage, indeed. We've put out a lot of information there, which we hope gives you the whole sense of the direction of travel. This got slightly interfered with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and we spent last year running around desperately trying to find gas and cope with short-term issues. But I think on reflection, and I hope it's not controversial, that the Russian crisis has actually cemented and confirmed our need to make progress with the energy transition and to speed it up. That was the message of Repower EU. It's not that there were temporary spikes in coal consumption or in gas consumption, but it reinforced that the most secure, the increasingly cheapest, and the most sustainable is the green transition and renewable energy. So speeding that up is critical, and grids are a fundamental part of that. Now, we know we have a good framework for developing Europe's grids. Claude flagged up that we do have a good grid system here. That's been fostered and facilitated with the 10E regulation, we like to think, in the Commission. The 10E regulation and the PCI framework have been helping to identify the best ways we can mesh the European grid, interconnect the European grid and make it more resilient, and that in itself facilitates the uptake of renewables and the integration of renewables into the European-wide grid. And we've also added to that regulatory framework, even with the latest electricity market design proposal, where we flagged up the need to reflect on tariffs. These are a key financial incentive for the way grids are developed across the EU. So the need for tariffs to reflect more on total expenditure, to be able to anticipate investment. These are changes that we need to make to the tariff base to ensure that we can stimulate and encourage the investments we need. So we have that framework there, but grids, they'll continue to be critical, but they continue to need to change drastically. We don't have the massive rollout of smart meters that we need across the EU. It's fantastic to hear the high numbers in Luxembourg. You've got certain neighbours where the numbers are a bit lower. So, 0.9, for instance. So yes, we know the direction of travel. We know we've got to speed everything up, and on the digital side in particular, the smartening of the grids is fundamental. Whether that's the smart meters, but on the grid side, there's just all the bidirectional communications we need, a lot more data exchange we need, getting TSOs and DSOs to be able to talk together and exchange data more clearly and more rapidly. These are all fundamental. And it's all the more important given that we're having increasingly variable energy supply, which is to say more wind and solar coming onto the grid, and much more flexible and responsive demand as well, which is a bit of a novelty for the grids. We're not used to having own consumption, self-consumption, energy sharing, heat pumps and electric vehicles, which can play a partial storage role once they've got bidirectional capability. So every aspect of that needs digitalization, needs smartening up, and, well, that's why we're discussing this today. From the Commission side, I think we've got the basis of the framework there, and already with that framework, with the 10E regulation and the PCI framework, and with CEF funding, we're stimulating the key projects to act as flagships to highlight the European benefits from smartening the grid. But that's at the European level. We also have a lot, and I hope some of today's discussion will also focus on the local issues, because we tend to, at Commission level, focus on what's cross-border and what's at a macro level, but so much of this also has to happen at the distribution level. So I'm very glad you're here today to help bring that point out. So thanks very much. I look forward to the discussion. I think we have a good regulatory framework to be starting with, but let's build on that. And and pick up the issues in the coming days, whether it's the coming months, whether it's the storage that needs reflecting. And again, in the market design, we've got a hook now that we want member states to have a flexibility objective, flexibility targets, and communicate that, plan for that, and set that out to all the stakeholders. That's somewhere where we can start talking about the different types of flexibility we need and the storage options we need. So we have legislative and regulatory hooks to make sure we stimulate this discussion, improve the planning and the communication to roll out the smart grids. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Tom. So does audience agree that we have good regulatory framework? Are you ready for self-consumption, or you feel ready, or you already self-consume? I'm just also a bit provoking. Please express your opinions in Slido by asking questions. And we are moving on with our speakers. It's a great pleasure for me to actually present our next speaker, Paloma Bagorote, Acting Director of CINEA. And yes, Paloma, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anna, and also good morning to everybody. You know, after hearing this provocative talk, apparently, according to Anna, but also, you know, the perspective from the Commission on the regulatory framework, you know, CINEA as an executive agency is working more on giving finance, and that's the perspective, you know, I wanted to share with you today. You know, I'm very happy to discuss with you the different ideas and how the different stakeholders can do in order to integrate more renewables into the European electricity network. And we think that, you know, smart grids can do a role here. You know, CINEA exists in 2021, but is the successor of a previous agency, and we are funding programs which are very much integrated in what the European Green Deal is about. Particularly, we are talking about the Connecting Europe facility, Horizon Europe, and renewable financing mechanisms. But for today, I would like to center my presentation more on some key figures about the Connecting Europe facility. You know, the role of smart grids, together with electricity interconnectors, storage and CO2 networks, are very important to deliver these objectives. And this goes hand in hand with the growing efforts to strengthen cross-border cooperation in renewable energy that increases deployment of renewables across Europe. So let me just highlight some figures. Since 2014, CINEA has supported the development of 167 strategic cross-border infrastructure, allocating 6.3 billion euros to energy projects of common interest and cross-border renewable projects. Those European Union funds trigger an overall amount of investment across Europe of more than 13 billion euros in key energy infrastructure. And more specifically, in the fields of smart grids and cross-border renewables, CEF has contributed until now with 331 million euros to 11 projects awarded. These projects have the objective to provide technical and economic solutions to improve interoperability, efficiency, and affordability. And this, in turn, facilitates the integration of renewables and decarbonization of the energy systems. So I just want to give you two examples today of some successful projects which have been financed by the Connecting Europe facility. Well, the first one is SyncroGrid. This is a project which has been already completed and was implemented by the Slovenian and Croatian transmission system operators. And what they have done is they have completed together a number of joint innovative solutions, such as a virtual cross-border control center that now allows a better forecast and control of electricity coming from renewable in both sides of the countries. We also, under this project, they have also developed a dynamic thermal rating system, which allows receiving real-time information on the parameters, operational parameters of the electricity lines. Another example is the Danubian grid. This is a project which is now currently transforming the grid at national but also cross-border areas of Slovakia and Hungary. And in this project, what is being done is that the substations, the electric lines and operational systems are being modernized by installing smart digital elements and also developing IT solutions. And these solutions will help to accommodate new market players, like, for example, energy communities, and integrate electricity for renewables. So, these are just two examples, and I'm sure that there will be others today that they will be presented that will help you to inspire, the challenge and to take up this challenge of clean energy transition. What we are doing at CINEA, we believe that, policy is one side, but you cannot do policy without funding. And funding is a way of supporting the policy of the Commission. So with CINEA, with the projects that we are financing, we hope that we will be able to contribute to this, close this investment gap in the energy infrastructures and help to the sustainability, affordability, and security of energy supply. So just to conclude, I cannot stay much longer than this session, but, I have colleagues here today. They are in the stand, they are around. So if you would like to meet them, please go to the stand. They can tell you more about these funding programs, and they can give you some advice of how we can help. So I hope that, all together, we will be able to support the energy transition in Europe.
Thanks, Paloma. So do I. And yeah, indeed, I can join the invitation to visit CINEA's stand. And thanks, Paloma, for giving us two examples. I know that you will need to leave at some point. Actually, we are going to hear two more examples, as far as I am aware. And I would like to invite Tomasz Simonosoglu, who actually is the head of subsidy management unit at EGD, Czechia, at DSO. And then, Tomasz, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anna, for introduction. Thank you for being here. It looks like a pretty nice event. So may I ask you to switch on the presentation we prepared? Okay, so I can start without the presentation. So I'm working in the company, thank you. It shouldn't look like that, but whatever. So I'm working in the EGD company. We are DSO we are distribution system operator in Czech Republic. And we come up with a ACON project, ACON Connected Networks, with our colleagues from Slovakia, ZSD. We started in the year 2018, and we should finish the project in the year 2018. The total value of the project is about 180 million euros, and we were lucky, and we got the EU funding from CEF, so thanks for that. It makes our job easier, let's say this way. So thank you for the funding. And we have like 5 activities in the project. The first activity is focused on the cross-border interconnection. So we have a physical interconnection in our grids. It's quite rare, let's say this way, on the DSO level. But it's partially because we were Czechoslovakia back in the day. So until 1993, we were one state. In 1993, our presidents decided to separate the countries, and we became Czech Republic and Slovakia Republic. But as the ACON is again connecting networks, we say, hey, let's continue with the tradition. Let's get back, one step back, one step ahead, and we came with a new interconnection on the medium and high voltage line, which is quite rare. We use it only as we are allowed to in the crisis situations. So when it's necessary, we switch it on, and thanks to that, the customers are still getting electricity. of course, we are investing in the grid to be able to connect more renewables and the other stuff. In the next activity, we have a deployment on smart assets. So there is a bunch of assets which are remotely controlled, getting data from the grid, and so on and so on. We modernized more than 1,000 secondary substations with a power quality monitoring, so we are able to collect the data from our grid and we know what's happening. Why is this quite necessary? To be able to plan in the future, to know what's going on, and to be able to invest, in smarter way in our asset, which is quite important right now. Also, we have activity. It was on the next slide. We will see if it's possible to see there something. Yeah, so we have another activity which is focused on the communication. Honestly, if you have in the grid some smart asset, usually it communicates, but you have to collect somehow the data. So yeah, we try to put, some reliable sources of communication, so it means optical fiber, to be able to connect data as it's necessary and always get it on the right place. So it means in the end to our dispatching center. So this is the activity 3. And of course we have the last, but I don't want to say the lowest, or the last activity, which is focused also on the IT tools. So it means investments in the dispatching, new features about the steering, and so on and so on. So let's say it's a full package. You start in the interconnection, physical interconnection, you go through the smart asset, which allowed you to do, more sexy stuff in the end. Then we have a communication, and in the end, we have the IT platform which is using this data. So it's a full package. How we use that? We have real use cases. The next slide, please. Yeah, this is, not the really nice one, but it was a use case. Back in the days, 2 years ago, we had a tornado in Czech Republic. I don't know how you know the Czech Republic, but it's not, really usual to have tornadoes in the Central Europe. We're not the US, but yeah, we had a tornado, and it completely destroyed 3 cities. Luckily, there weren't many casualties, but also our grid was quite mashed and destroyed. On the right photo, you can see our high voltage line. This high voltage line went to the gas storage facility. Usually, to rebuild this high voltage line in that time takes like a year, honestly. To be able to get the poles, to be able to done it properly, it's like a year. Luckily, thanks to the ACON, we built interconnection to the Slovakia. So we were able to use the interconnection to our colleagues from Slovakia, and we were able to deliver the electricity to the gas storage facility, which is one of the biggest in the Czech Republic, and to be able to pump the gas in the storage and to use it in the winter. Without that, probably the electricity we will be able to get there in like 3 months. So this was one of the not very nice use cases, but in the end, it was a use case. The next slide. This is, let's say, the perspective of Czech Republic, the EGD distribution area. Down there, you see our distribution area. It's like 1/3 of Czech Republic. Connection of renewables. Unfortunately, you can't see the numbers, but I will tell you. So in 2021, 22, you see on the graph the new requests from our customers to connect the renewable sources. You can see the difference from 2021 to 2022. It was an energy crisis, the one big solution company in Czech Republic, there was bankruptcy on the big company. So a lot of customers said, hey, we need a PV, it's economically efficient, so let's use that. So from the year 2021, in total, we have 7,500 connection requests from our customers. In 2022, it was 37,000. So I'm not good in math, but it's a big difference. We thought that this will change in 2023. No, it didn't, honestly. So we're still going higher and higher. To invest in copper takes time, and it's really expensive. So luckily, we were able to manage and steer the grid thanks to the, let's say, the smarter solutions. So we don't have to invest so much in the copper, and we can steer the grid in the way that we are still able to connect the customers. You know, it's not one day to connect you, but in the end, it's still better than without the ACON project. And now the situation a little bit changed from the perspective of the SO. Back in the days, you know, that the biggest issue was on the TSO side, as there were big renewable sources. But currently, we're on the even worst case, let's say, that way, because we have micro sources on the roof of households, and everything is connecting to the DSO grid. So now it's a tough and challenging situation for us to manage it and to be able to connect customers as they want to in some short time period. Maybe some synergies. Next slide, please. Thanks to the ACON project, we were able to, you know, be able to join another project which is called OneNet. We're part of the project, and we're focused on it's focused on flexibility. In Czech Republic, we're doing, we call it traffic light for the flexibility providers. So we came up in cooperation with the second DSO in Czech Republic. We came up with a solution. So we say to the flexibility providers when they are able to provide the flexibility. It really looks like a traffic light. So we tell you how much and when you can provide. So it's one use case, and thanks to the data we have from the grid and the stuff we install in the ACON, we are able to do this pretty nice thing. And also, as we had the experience with the ACON, we came up with another smart grid project, which is called Gabreta. It was also enlisted on the 5th PCI list. And the focus of this project is to start the cooperation with the colleagues from Germany in Beinwerk. It's also the distribution company. And the situation is totally opposite to the ACON. ACON is, again, connected networks, and Gabreta, let's say, it's totally disconnected networks. Because if you have a look on a border region between the West Germany, because of the communist time, there is literally no interconnection on the DSO and TSO level. So we are perfectly disconnected. So we want to change it from the perspective of DSO. We want to build new interconnections, and let's say, and to take the experiences from the ACON, put it in the Gabreta, and do hopefully even a better project with better results and outcomes. Thanks for your participation. I made it in 10 minutes. So.
Thanks a lot, Tomasz. And yes, you did manage that. However, you also provided quite interesting information for the audience on real case examples, which could be actually, I think, quite easily replicated. Now, let's move to our second part of the session, to our interactive debate. And thanks, Paloma, for joining us. And I know that you need to leave. We have our panel actually enlarged a bit, although we are losing Paloma, but we are having two new panel members. Whom I would like you to introduce. So the first one is Ricard Venetiochi, energy expert at ETSOR. And then we have Alvaro Prieto, project manager of various projects. However, in particular, I want to mention one, which it's called Trinity. It's a buzzword, right? And it's, if I got it right, it's means transmission system enhancement of regional borders by means of intelligent market technology, right? Okay, so it's a long word, but I'm sure that we will hear about insights of this project, which fit our topic today. And as I said, my dear audience, you are here also to work. So I would really appreciate if you join Slido polls. And there you will find a question, the first question, in one word, how would you describe the smart grids? So that would be for audience actually to express the views. You heard the speakers, you heard the first interventions, and maybe you have your own ideas as well. So what would be the word that you would use? I see some already appearing. So we have flexibility, efficiency, interconnected, Okay, that's quite reflecting the keywords that we heard today. I would also like the panel members to catch the keywords and see if that also applies to your thinking. Maybe you have something to actually add or disagree. That also is an interesting point today. Okay, thanks a lot. Then let's capture this if someone has a phone to capture this Slido cloud. And I would like you to move to a second question in Slido. Could you please say in one word how smart grids can help integration of renewable energy sources? So I see balancing like prevailing for the time being. What else? Digitalization. Okay, control. Okay. I would also invite our panel members to note those keywords, and let's see how that would be reflected in your thinking. I saw some actually questions related to that, so that's quite an interesting compilation that I see. But control and balancing seems prevailing. Okay, very interesting. So then let's see how our panel members perceive or comment these results. And actually, I would like to start with Richard. We already heard some statistics, right, today. I think Claude already kickstarted with some statistics. I heard other speakers speaking about the statistics. So we all like those figures, right? We like to interpret them, to have a bit of you know, our own interpretation. You, as a person working with DSOs, what statistics you have? What things you would highlight for infrastructure and smart grids in terms of statistics?
Well, yeah, exactly. I think that we are very good on the European level, both as DSOs, but also institutions, to talk about billions and trillions and gigawatt hour and etc. And it's quite difficult to relate to what does this actually mean. So we're trying to do a bit of a calculation exercise. So I'm today representing EDSO. It's a European association for the largest DSOs in Europe. Our industry is very capex intense, and just to put a figure of how much grids we actually have in Europe. So we are estimating that our grids will be able to run 280 times around the globe, which is also 28 times to the moon. We also believe that the industry will continue to be quite capex intense. I mean, we are transitioning towards digital solutions to operate the grid more efficiently, but we will always need the grid as the backbone. We have had the industry, EDSO did a joint study with Directorate. It was roughly 2 years ago. This study estimated that the investment in grids until 2030 is roughly 400 billion. That study is 2 years ago. One of our member companies, E.ON, they made a recent study which is more adapted to recent political initiatives such as the Repower EU. And from 2 years ago, they are now expecting to connect 230% more connections than 2 years ago. So that figure, 400 billion, we will probably have to raise that a bit. And now I'm talking about billions again. So what does this actually mean? So we have taken this study from one of our members, which is operating in grids in 8 different member states, and then we have scaled it up to the European level. So these are estimates, ballpark figures. So they are not an absolute truth, but it will give you some kind of understanding of what it means. That means that in Europe we will have to connect 9 million new connections per year. That is 3,600 connections per hour. 175 large-scale wind turbines and 4,200 football fields of solar panels per month until 2030. 4,200 football fields of solar panels until 2030 per month. That is pretty insane. And that is challenging on many levels.
Yeah, that sounds quite tough figures, to be honest. I am looking forward to some questions about that. I see some already popping up. Before we go to that, I actually want to ask Alvaro about technologies. I see in our questions artificial intelligence mentioned. I see a blockchain. I see another word, optimization, quite frequent in our questions. So these are the technological points, and I know that you worked on those with your projects, with your partners as well. So can you please tell us what is trending? What are your findings? What you can offer to the market and actually to DSOs, or also to us all?
Yeah, thanks. Well, first of all, to say that the basis of all that words that have you said, optimization, artificial intelligence, blockchain, the basis for all of that is digitalization. I mean, without digitalization, you cannot provide this kind of new features or new functionalities to the DSO or to renewable energy promoters. Just always talking from the perspective of this kind of European projects, when we start developing technologies, the technology providers, we are always asking to the DSOs or to these partners, what type of data do you have? For example, if we are trying to provide more services to the DSO, do you have the topology in a digital format? How is the smart meter rollout that do you have? Also, when talking with renewable energy promoters, we always ask them what type of data your SCADA provides, and also how this can be transferred to other digital solutions. So yes, we can provide them a lot of new functionalities, but digitalization come first, and then we can talk about power flow calculations, predictive maintenance, optimization of prosumers, consumption and production, etc.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I'm looking to Claude, actually. I see you scribing something. I hope it's good ideas to share. You heard statistics from Ricard, right? Which is, you know, you can perceive them differently. You saw some keywords, how the audience, perceive the smart grids and then the renewable integration. What are your thoughts as a actually decision maker in a kind of very powerful position?
I think the only way to bridge the ambition of the rollout of the renewables, wind onshore, wind offshore, big solar project, small solar project, with the grid is massive digitalization. And that has also to be favored by the regulatory regime. So I know that at least some regulators are still very hostile or not very eager to allow the grid companies to invest into IT experts, because there's always this issue, they want the workforce to be not too abundant. And so I think the first thing which we have to get, and therefore, again, my ask to Commission, we need to sit down with the regulators. If the regulators do stupid regulation, you cannot expect to have intelligent grid operators behind. So the regulators must understand that we need to go now into a new phase, which is massive investment, but with a lot of digital competencies, and allowing also through the fees to finance digital competence in the distribution companies. In Luxembourg, we will get a new female CEO of the grid company. And my key message to her was, try to be a consumer-driven organization. Because today I get almost everyday mails from citizens who are highly motivated to do PV, and then I have cases where our grid operator is turning up 3 or 4 times to install a 10 kilowatt PV. That is, of course, that is very costly, inefficient. The citizen is desperate because he wants a PV. He doesn't want to have regular visits of the engineer from the grid company. Yeah? So, and what they are now doing, so in September they will come up with an app which is a digital-based communication system between the grid company and the electricians. So that the guy from electrician, is that also the right word in English?
Electricians, yes.
Huh?
Electrician.
So the guy of the electrician, if he is standing before the box where he has to connect, he can call the app, he can film in real time and say, am I allowed to put it there? Because today, he needs then another, that takes another 2 months to get the guy from the distribution company. So that is desperate. So we are now trying to use modern release, so an app to organize the interface between the electricians and the grid company. And we are abolishing something which was maybe right 10 years ago, which is a second extra smart meter for PV, and we are now designing a different statistical method in order to favor rapid uptake of PV. And then what we are also organizing with our research institutions in Luxembourg, we have quite some good guys on IT. We will do a digital twin of our whole electricity system. We will do a national energy data platform where all the data from the smartest meters will get in, and that energy data platform that will be helping, of course, consumers to switch from one competitor to another. It will be the basis for the self-consumption. And by the way, by law in Luxembourg, the grid operator is obliged to do the financial calculations of a solar community. So because they have the data, so the grid operators are obliged to do the number crunching for the community so that we ease basically this. I have one neighbor who wants 30% and the other who is bringing 70%. So all that is an obligation in Luxembourg to the grid operators to do the how do we call this, the bookkeeping of this. And then I think a last issue where we really need this zero carbon ancillary services. And of course that is more a TSO business, but what we try to also to be a front runner in Luxembourg is local flexibility markets. I do not know how much market that will be because it's not sure to have, so probably it's the distribution company who will define certain areas and then try to get bits of, okay, I use my hot water storage to integrate my heat pump. The other one is using the, let's say, IT optimization of the EV vehicle, maybe then the vehicle to grid. So I think we need these local flexibility markets, and that's also something where we are working on in Luxembourg. And maybe 2 last things. I'm so pleased that higher up in policy making in Brussels, they have finally understood that you cannot do an energy transition without having an industrial policy. And we still need collectively to convince them that cables, transformators, all the digital around that is a strategic industry for Europe. And I'm a bit amazed that there's so much talk about Huawei being kicked out of our mobile telephone infrastructure, and that nobody speaks about a lot of Chinese devices in our grid. So why is it a problem in mobile telephone equipment, and why is it not a problem in electricity? So are we coherent at EU level? Or there is a problem, and if there is a problem in the IT mobile phone, then I think we need also to think about how do we nurture or friendshore the equipment of the grid. And then the last, in Luxembourg, we have now the baby boomers are leaving our grid company, and we are desperate to get young people in. And I think what is my pledge to you is you have to run the best communication campaigns to get Greta and brothers and sisters generation to work for the grid operators. And I want Greta and brothers and sisters on Friday massively at noon on the streets, because the policymakers, they need pressure. But from Monday to Friday morning, I want them on the roof to connect the PV, on the cellar to connect an HP, the EV, and I want them to work for you. And don't underestimate what we are doing is a fantastic sense-making opportunity for a generation which understands that we are late on climate change. And we need to connect these young, motivated people to your companies. And today, often, I don't know if you go out on the dance floor on a Friday evening and you say to somebody, I'm working for a grid company, that's very sexy. Yeah? So you have to basically you have to work a bit on your sexiness.
I think we might have volunteers. I see around some nodding. So Claude, you probably will get some CVs in those emails that you get daily.
I didn't ask to work for me. I asked to work for the grid companies.
Actually, I think we a bit motivated the audience to think about their future job career. And I see Ricard wants to react. Please, Ricard.
Yes, thank you. No, I just think that Claude just had a very important point at the start. So you were mentioning that DSOs we will have to do the digital transformation. Basically, we need to become way more digital, and a part of actually getting there is to have the proper incentives. Of course, incentives is a bit of a boring word, and I'm almost getting tired of hearing myself saying it, but it is very important. Today's regulatory models are very capex biased, and we need to have at least some kind of equal treatment of our digital solutions, because today, in most member states, we're actually being penalized by increasing our OPEX costs and working with this digital solution. And you, Tom, also mentioned that in the new market design, we have a push for that with what could be perceived as the TOTEX model, and that is a step forward, definitely. But I would also like to remind you that in the previous package, the Clean Energy package, which was finalized in 2019, I believe, there was also a push for NRAs to implement incentive for DSOs to work with digital solutions. And last autumn, we did a bit of a smaller survey with 8 different member states, and it turned out that none of these member states had any kind of incentives implemented 3.5 years after the regulation was finalized. So it is good that we are getting new regulation, but we must also make sure that the old regulation is being taken into account as well.
So in Luxembourg, we are now we have now discussions between the regulator and the distribution companies to go to a TOTEX model.
Okay.
Yeah, that regulatory part I also see in some of the questions in Q&A. Tom, I think it's your call to. I know we don't have a regulator from a regulatory authority. I should say we did try to get one. But then, Tom, what are your insights on this topic?
Well, as you flagged up, we're very much aware of the issue, and that's why already in the last legislation we flag it, and there needs to be a discussion about reforming the tariff structures and the incentives that they provide. You're also right that there's a lot of legislation there that we should actually pause, catch our breath, and start implementing. There's a vast amount there that we need to get cracking on. And that's certainly what the Commission is gearing up for doing. Once, touch wood, we can put to bed the different pieces of legislation which are still open. Hopefully they'll be closed soon, and we can get back to a coordination of member states' implementation. We've got lots of mechanisms to do this. We have good examples, partly with CINEA projects. We've got good examples of concerted actions on renewables, on efficiency. There's lots of ways we can be having a discussion with member states on implementation, and we want to get into that. But I think the different examples around the panel have just flagged up the change in attitude and mindset that is needed, both in regulators but also with grids and companies. The big numbers can sound very scary. Huge football fields or swimming pools, or they sound intimidatingly big. But if you turn those numbers in terms of revenues for a company or new sales opportunities for the providers or for the installers, then it can be actually seen as a good commercial opportunity, and we're growing a market. So there's a positive way to take those big numbers. And the other thing that we learn as students to deal with when we've got great big problems that seem insurmountable is to break them down. So let's go back to just doing what we can do next week. Claude, you were saying this. Let's just do it, get on with it. Stop worrying about the huge numbers that we face in 2030. Let's see what we need to do this month, next month, before the summer, by the end of the year. Those numbers are smaller, they're more digestible, and we actually need to start getting into it.
Well, I think we need to ask the company, right? You mentioned that let's talk, let's do things. So, Tomasz, I think it's now your turn.
Yeah, many interesting ideas. First of all, I'm glad that I found my wife before I started working for DSO, probably. As you know, it's not probably pretty sexy job when, luckily, I'm not a big dancer, so my Fridays evening is with my dog and PlayStation playing football. So, but get back to the many interesting ideas. First of all, you know, focusing on what's ahead of you in a short time period is quite not possible from the DSO perspective, as everything takes a lot of time to implement. So in our perspective, we have to think, you know, in 5, 7, 8 years perspective, what's ahead of us. Because I always say that we are enablers. So if you want to come with some pretty nice solution, you need our asset, which enables you to do your solution. As we do, you know, we do the grid. As it was said, it's not much sexy, right? We do the grid, cables, secondary substations. It doesn't look nice. No one wants to have it in her neighborhood or in his. So we have to think in advance. Electromobility, PVs, everything. So to build a primary substation, for example, takes like 7, 8 years, sometimes 10. Sometimes we can never do it. And because of that, we can't do this short-term stuff, but we have to think, you know, in advance a lot. So we are, as I say, we are enablers. The problem with the PVs, with the installation, you know, we have quite the same tricky stuff. We are just connecting, you know, the PVs installation of the roofs. So the solution company comes, install the PVs, customer call, hey, we have, you know, PV, just connect us. And there are many requirements from the safety perspective, health protection of our technicians and everything, which must be checked from our technicians. And because of the, you know, quality of PV installations, many times we go there, as you said, 2, 3, 4 times, you know, and it's on our cost in the end, because we can't charge more to the customer, and the customer is not more motivated to have higher quality installation. Because during 2022, you know, many companies pop up with the installation of PVs, and sometimes they don't know what to do. They're cheap, people buy it. So the customer awareness, from my perspective, is a really important topic. We try to do our best to explain our customers that not always, you know, the cheapest solution is the best one.
If I may, so we have, of course, a bit of a similar problem in Luxembourg. What I think it's probably easier to train the electricians. And so what we are thinking about is to do, certified electricians. And if you are a certified electrician, then you get a fast track with the grid operator. So because I think the customer, let's be happy that the citizen decides, I want the PV. Let's not, so as Monique from the Berg is always saying, a citizen is not a full-time professional of the energy transition. I think what a citizen needs and what is enough for me is when he's motivated to put these devices. And all the rest has to be taken up by the professionals. So I think it is your task to help, and maybe with the help of the government, that's what we are doing in Luxembourg, is certified electricians who have a very detailed standardized, you have to do 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, and you can phone me, and then if I have a question, you answer me via Visio, and that saves time and money also for you.
That's what we are currently doing. We have, running the project, you will get the list of the electricians. You can hire the guy who knows what he's doing, and it will save your and our time. So that's what we are currently developing. Yeah. And maybe the last point about, so the customer awareness is really important also from our perspective. We did, a project when you can search the web, and we do a technical evaluation of PV equipment assets. So you can scroll down the table and see the technical evaluation of the quality of switcher and PV panel and everything. So we try to tell the customers, if you buy this kind of the asset, it's not the high quality one. And we try to provide more information that we are obliged currently. It's on top of our mandatory stuff. And maybe the last point, which was also discussed, is the cybersecurity, the China components in grid. We have quite high quality standards in E.ON group. So currently, all the China equipment was ruled out from all the communication stuff. Also, when we had a procurement for the smart metering, there were pretty tough standards to meet to be able to provide us your smart meter, mainly from the perspective of cybersecurity. So we try to do, all the best we can in the regulation as it is currently, but the same with the batteries. We wanted to do the best, but in the end, it's not allowed for us to include the battery and the regulatory asset base. So we're not allowed to invest our own money to that because it's not regulated asset. And if we have the battery as we had one, we had to sell it because we weren't allowed to operate it in the grid.
Yeah, and therefore, I think on that, the solution is you are allowed to do tenders for zero carbon entry services. And that is the way to bridge beyond that. Was it a wise decision or not of us as European policymakers to exclude you from planning and then also operating the storage? I have a bit of a nuanced approach to the text, but I can't change the text now. So I think we should now, you are in the driving seat with the entry services. And you should use these and then try to do and that is something which CINEA should also finance, this kind of the first zero carbon entry services, with some money from Brussels also to ease the OPEX, not the OPEX, but the CAPEX of batteries or others. I think that would be something really important that we learn now, because we will need this at least after 25 or 2028.
I think Paloma already mentioned that we are looking forward to new programs that especially the revised CINEA regulation, which kind of triggers new PCI and PMI list as of next year. So let's see what it brings on our plate. And we have maybe, hopefully at some point, the discussion on CEF3. So that also is something that, Claude, I hope you can pick it up at the council's level. I actually see that we have some questions concerning what already was mentioned about the privacy concerns, right? The devices or the source of the devices. Alvaro, a question would be to you, technologically point of view. What are your findings on that? Is there something that you can tell us from the projects that you implementing? Yeah.
Okay. Regarding cybersecurity, it is a dimension that it is being tackled in this smart grid projects. Maybe not the main focus, because we are mainly focused on new technologies for specific functionalities. But talking about the cybersecurity, we have to implement them in many ways. And at different levels, starting from the end users, from small prosumers and consumers. We need to, for sure, first of all, anonymize their data in order to be sure that when we use it for artificial intelligence algorithms, anyone that has this data can extract information from a single consumer, or that can link that this consumption is from Álvaro Fuentes, for example. Then also we move to the distribution and to the transmission level. And there, for example, in some projects, specifically in a project that we are starting right now, we are implementing blockchain in order to provide more secure data transactions between technology providers and the DSOs. And well, at the end, as another level of the energy sector that usually is forgotten, which is the market sector. Then it is also interesting to apply. I'm talking about, again, blockchain because it's what I know from my projects, but probably will be another ways. But you can also provide blockchain technologies in order to ensure the transparency and integrity of the data. For example, when talking about submission of bids and offers for intraday markets, but also especially interesting for also guarantees of origin markets, which in some cases the transparency is not perceived as the best one.
Okay, thank you very much. So we have certain things already possible. I'm sure things are coming. Those who actually are quite interested, I see a couple of questions. I think Alvaro will be able to reply in more concrete ways. So we had a discussion on kind of many topics, right? And then smart electricity grids were the center of attention. We expanded the topic, I would say, quite in all directions. I would give to our panel members like a kind of last chance to summarize their main insights to the audience. And I would like actually to start with Ricard. So what are your main messages then out of this debate? And it should be short.
Okay, so I'm supposed to summarize. I was just getting started on the 10E actually, so how to sum it up? I believe that I was not provoked by Claude at all. He called DSOs the jewels of the energy transition. I like to call ourselves the central nervous system of the energy transition, but perhaps I should switch to jewels. I believe we have also some kind of consensus on the incentives for OPEX solutions, the digital solutions, which will be so extremely important in order for the DSOs to enable the very high ambitions from the EU. That is key. And I believe that TOTEX is a start, but it's not perhaps the final solution. Incentives are important, and it's not the end of the world if the incentives are quite strong to start with in order to get the solutions going. So enable, to reward early movers, basically. Okay, I'm not going to steal any more time, so pass it over to
Thanks,
Tom.
Thanks, Ricard. I think, Tom, now is your turn.
Okay, from my perspective, I hope it's clear to everyone that we have a good framework for promoting the digitalization and the smartening of the grid at European level and throughout the institutional and regulatory framework we have in Europe for making all of this happen. It can always be improved, and we will continue to work with member states and regulators to both implement the existing legislation and to improve the way it's applied. But all of us in our different positions can use the framework that we have and to push day by day to make progress, because we need to make progress.
Thanks a lot. Alvaro, what would be your insights?
Yeah, my final words would be, of course, promoting the technology for the smart grids, just very quickly in three fields, because I think that this increase in technology provides optimization of the smart grid, and this is translated into economical benefits. So starting from the top, let's say, for the distribution systems and for the transmission system, for example, it is quite interesting to apply artificial intelligence for dynamic line rating, as has been said before. This reduces the operational costs of the distribution system operators and also the transmission system operators. Also, we can, for small DSOs, we can provide technology that facilitates the management of the new PV installations that are being installed in the grid, because normally new PVs provide some problems of voltage control. We can provide technology to avoid that voltage control and then increase the share of renewables of distributed renewables. Then we can also move to the renewable energy sector part. We can apply predictive maintenance technologies in order to reduce the time that, for example, wind farms are in operation, in order to increase the share of renewable that they are producing and feeding to the grid. And as more renewables they are, the lower energy prices we have. And finally, from the prosumer side, for small and medium customers, also we are developing a lot of technologies to increase their awareness and to also optimize the consumption and even production if they have batteries. And well, as a mandate of the European Commission, my company developed an energy landscape for checking what type of prosumers applications are available along all Europe. And the main finding of that is that it is needed a common European reference framework in order that, let's say, all the design of these new home applications for home energy management system or building energy management system should be common. So now we are promoting a proposal and a project. In fact, with several DSOs from EUSEW, we have already contacted them in order to try to facilitate this framework for facilitating the life to the prosumers. And also, I mean, I totally agree with the importance of battery also from Claude, but I think that he has explained it very well, so I will finish my intervention here.
Okay, Alvaro, I hope you contacted Luxembourgish DSO as well for this common application. I would love to have it one in Belgium. Tomasz, what are your insights?
I will highlight 1, 2, 3, 4 points. Safety and reliability of the operation. So this is, one of the most important stuff we always must to have on our mind. The second point is customer orientation. So as I said, to be the enabler of the solution which our customers want to develop. The third point, cost efficiency and affordability for the customers. It's all about the effective investments in our grid to be able to cover it from our capex and also to, deliver the fair prices for our customers. And the last point, but not the least one, is to do always something on top. Not to do only the mandatory stuff, the must-have, but do something on the top, like we did the ACON, like we prepared, the Gabreta, like we do Horizon project. This is the stuff on top, which in the end cost us, some money and effort to invest, but the outcomes in the end were much, bigger than the effort invested. So these are, from my perspective, the most important points we always have to have on our minds.
Thanks, Thomas. Claude, we have 4 minutes.
I intended to speak 30 seconds, but now you motivate me. So I think Thomas What's your first name?
Tomasz.
Tomasz is right. The very core business of every grid operator is the security of supply. That must always be, we cannot endanger the system. That's always, I think, the number one. And then the second is, of course, always do it in the most efficient way. But then I would say I have six messages. One is the end game is now. It's really 2035, fully decarbonized power system, 90% renewables, and the grid hardware and the grid software must be able to carry that, because that is the real world. The real world is not the world of social media, the fossil fascists of all kind of parties which attacks the energy transition. The real world is climate change. I started to work in climate change in 1988, and I'm really scared. I'm really scared. Look what's happening in Canada, what's happening in Europe. So we don't have time anymore. So now is the end game. We plan now for the zero carbon power system in Europe at latest in 2035. Second is the regulators must be in the energy transition mood. That is an investment, reinvestment mood, and therefore we need to go to TOTEX. And I have asked Commission to put some gentle massaging on ACER to come up with why doesn't ACER produce a report where they say, okay, that is the methodology for TOTEX in Europe. Instead, that every national regulator is now inventing the wheel. Tom, that's something which you could take home and write a mail tomorrow morning. Third is the grid has to go digital, and then we need capacities. And so what we have done in Luxembourg, we have earmarked a certain percentage of the investment of the grid company into research. So our grid company has now a participation, for example, in a startup which has designed a feeder for the electric buses, which all go electric in Luxembourg, so that during the night they can take more than the grid normally would, the grid, let's say, norms would allow them. So I think what the grid, if I would be even a bit more in the driving seat of a grid company, I would really nurture an ecosystem of, you take a little bit of your money and you go to the best universities, you nurture startups, and then you grow a community on this interface between the hardware and the software. That will bring you solutions, innovative solutions, and it will bring you workforce, which will be interested. First, they will develop it, and then they will want to work for you because they want to implement it. Be service-orientated. I think great that you have this already in your DNA, and that is, I think, grid companies, they didn't have clients, they had connection points. You need a service orientation and enabling. I like that very much. 5 is the industrial policy dimension. Europe, so in this zero whatever industry act, net industry act, one of the most important. So I'm less worried that the solar panels come from China than that the transformators come from China. So I don't understand why Commission is not putting more focus on we need to have all the devices which we need in the IT and all the devices we need in the hardware of the we need it, and there is, we speak about a lot of things but not enough about that, and I think that's also something for the ETSOs of this work and the ENSOE. They have to put much more focus, I think, on that. Then I mentioned this issue of the zero carbon entry services. That is something which we have to do to bridge this psychological wall with the storage. And that's something I think we now really need. So, of course, it's more a TSO business, but then that is something which can be integrated when we do the local flexibility markets. And the last thing, the sixth thing is be aware of your sexiness. You are the center of the energy transition. So, Greta and brothers and sisters, if you do a bit of good communication, they will love to work for you because they will understand that you are the center of this transition.
Thanks, Claude. I would like to ask the audience to take their devices and to have the last slide or poll. So after the session, how would you define, in one word, the benefits of smart grids? So you heard a lot of points, and I very appreciate Claude for making the summary. You actually spared my job, and it was brilliant. So I see sexiness, I see abundant, plus costs, obviously. We touched upon them a bit. What else? What kind of benefits? Green, okay. And we have some prevailing future, green future, I assume. We are talking about decarbonization, CO2 reduction, green. Green, this is what it's prevailing, so future green, okay. Really, I hope that every one of you took something today with you. I hope also that you have something to reflect upon. And actually, personally, I got a lot of topics and ideas what we can, discuss in the next EUSEW next year. So many thanks to everyone, and of course to the panel speakers. And I want to say my special thanks to Petra, Eduardo, and Dorina, who were actually with me from, with a high dedication from the moment the idea of this session was born. So I would also like to say thanks to EUSEW team, especially technicians. And please, let's give applause to us. Thanks a lot.